international fees for students. Joël Reland is a research associate at UK in a Changing Europe and joins us now from London. Joel, good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. I mean, as we've just mentioned there, it's not just the fishing industry that's crying out for staff. We can add hauliers, farmers, nursing and social care workers. The list goes on really, doesn't it? It is a concern for those people who are analysing what's going on like yourselves.
Yes, I think the really interesting thing when looking at these migration patterns is that Brexit was famously about taking back control of immigration, and to most people that was assumed to mean reducing numbers. That was clearly the direction of political rhetoric. But what we've seen since the referendum is that government recognises that it has a significant need for migration to come and fill a lot of job roles, which is why it's used this control to actually increase the numbers of people that are coming to the UK through quite a flexible immigration regime, which is now seeing net 600,000 people a year coming into the UK. The one big problem still for government is that the way its regime works is that it makes it easy for people with a relatively high salary and relatively high quote-unquote skills threshold to come in. But for other industries that have lower salaries, it's still quite hard, which is why you see industries like fisheries, like manufacturing, like hospitality, which are struggling to find people, especially because they often used to rely on EU labour. And while there are more people coming from countries like China, Nigeria, India, fewer people are coming from the European Union than before Brexit. So that is an added factor on top of everything else.
And it's a very hard conversation to have in the United Kingdom right now, because to talk about filling those gaps, it's like the government have to say, well, actually, we did something wrong that we have to try and correct. And therefore, the hardcore Brexiteers jump on that, do they not? To say that, you're not fulfilling the promise to the public. And then the public themselves are saying, well, we're not getting the services that we used to have before the vote. And why can't we have these same things that the government promised us after the vote?
Well, I think the fact that the government is even starting to make these changes to incentivise more people to come and work in industries like fisheries, to give those opportunities, is evidence that we've moved on from some of these old Brexit debates. And while it might upset some voters, the idea that more people are going to come from the EU or other parts of the world to do jobs in fisheries and elsewhere, I think there's a recognition on the government's part that when you look at the polling, the number one issue for voters by a million miles basically is the economy and the cost of living. Brexit is, I think, number 10 in terms of issues of priority. So when you're making a political calculation in number 10, you're going to prioritise making sure you're getting the people and the skills you need into the economy to try and get it moving again. And that's going to be more important than perhaps upsetting a few people who are angry at increasing numbers of workers in particular sectors like fishing.
It's funny, we talk about just a few people getting upset at the time of the vote. The vote was a very close one, 50-50. But now we're seeing, as you say, statistics and polling changing in a way that we never perhaps imagined. Seeing what happened in the United Kingdom. There is a distinct difference now, isn't there, really, in areas that voted for Brexit, those people and those communities saying, actually, this is perhaps a bit of a mistake for us, because they're now seeing the consequences of that. And that seems to be reflected across the United Kingdom at different levels and in different, you might say, voting areas.
It's certainly true that there is a growing amount of what you might call regret in the country, and that when you do polling today on how would you vote in a hypothetical second referendum, normally there's a majority of people who want to rejoin the EU. That's a pretty clear and consistent pattern over the past 12 months. But we would be mistaken to think that just because they say that in a poll means that that is what the will of the people is. Two reasons. The first is that simply Brexit, like I said before, is just not a top issue for most voters. And whilst they might think that they haven't got the economic benefits they were promised, they would rather the government focus now on dealing with inflation and things like that than holding another referendum, which I think for most of the country would be seen as torture to be put through again. And secondly, whilst in a hypothetical referendum, you might say, yes, we would be better off inside the European Union again. People don't like being told by politicians that they have been lied to or somehow misled. And so were another referendum to go underway, I imagine the tone of debate would change significantly from what we're seeing now, where there would be the reappearance of figures like Nigel Farage that could massively change the dynamics of the conversation compared to where we are today.
Interesting to get your thoughts. Thanks very much for joining us. Joël Reland there from UK in a Changing World. Oscar